In a quiet farmhouse on the outskirts of LaPorte, Indiana, Belle Gunness lived a life that seemed ordinary at first glance. But behind the facade of a hard-working widow and mother lay a chilling story that would shock the nation and cement her place in history as one of America's most infamous female serial killers. Her seemingly calm and composed demeanor masked unspeakable horrors that unfolded under her roof, where financial gain came at the cost of human lives. How could one woman manipulate, deceive, and murder so many without raising suspicion for years? This question continues to haunt the legacy of Belle Gunness, a name synonymous with betrayal and greed. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a time of rapid change and opportunity in America. Immigrants from all over the world sought to build better lives, and Belle was no different. Born in Norway, she came to America like countless others, chasing the promise of prosperity. But for Belle, the pursuit of wealth took a sinister turn. She discovered a path to fortune that required cunning, manipulation, and cold-blooded calculation. In a world where insurance fraud was on the rise, Belle became a master of the art, using marriage as a tool to lure unsuspecting victims into her trap. Belle Gunness' story is one of contrasts. On the surface, she appeared to be a grieving widow, raising children and trying to make a life for herself in a foreign land. To her neighbors, she seemed like a resilient woman who had suffered misfortune. But beneath that image lay a web of deceit and violence, where her charm and wit became tools to exploit the trust of others. Her victims, often men seeking companionship, would disappear without a trace, their fates only revealed years later in the most horrifying way imaginable. What makes Belle Gunness' story even more chilling is the enduring mystery that surrounds her death. When her farmhouse burned to the ground in 1908, the remains of numerous victims were uncovered, yet questions lingered. Was the body found among the ashes truly Belle's, or had she managed to escape, leaving her crimes behind? This uncertainty has kept her story alive for more than a century, fueling speculation about her final chapter. Through the lens of Belle Gunness' life, we confront uncomfortable questions about human nature and the lengths to which some will go to secure wealth and power. What could drive a person to commit such heinous acts? Was she shaped by the hardships of her time, or was her ambition uniquely ruthless? As we unravel the layers of her life, the story of Belle Gunness becomes a chilling reminder of how appearances can deceive and how darkness can thrive in the most unsuspecting places. Belle Gunness was born as Brynhild Paulsdatter Storseth on November 11, 1859, in the remote village of Selbu, nestled in the rugged terrain of central Norway. Her early years were marked by the unrelenting struggles of a family bound by poverty and the harsh demands of rural life. As the youngest of 8 children, Belle's childhood was defined by scarcity. Her father, Paul Peterson Storseth, worked as a stonemason and tenant farmer, while her mother, Berit Olsdatter, managed the household with a strict yet nurturing hand. Together, they tried to provide for their children in a world where resources were scarce, and opportunities for upward mobility were nearly non-existent. Life in 19th-century Selbu was as unforgiving as the landscape itself. Farming was the backbone of survival, but the rocky soil and short growing seasons meant that sustenance was always precarious. From an early age, Belle was no stranger to backbreaking labor. Alongside her siblings, she worked tirelessly in the fields, gathering crops and tending to livestock. This environment fostered resilience and a certain hardiness that would later become central to Belle's personality. Yet, it also planted the seeds of dissatisfaction. For someone as determined and ambitious as Belle, the idea of living her entire life confined to this austere existence was intolerable. Though her family instilled in her a strong work ethic, there was little room for formal education. The village school provided only the basics, and Belle, like many of her peers, attended sporadically. Still, she was known for her sharp mind and an ability to absorb what little knowledge came her way. Stories of those who had ventured to America, a land rumored to be brimming with opportunity, circulated among the villagers. These tales of success and prosperity kindled a spark in Belle, offering a tantalizing glimpse of what might lie beyond the mountains of Selbu. An incident in her late teens would become a turning point in Belle's life, though the details remain shrouded in uncertainty. According to local lore, she was assaulted at a community gathering by a wealthy man. The attack left her physically injured and emotionally scarred, yet no justice was served, as the perpetrator's social status shielded him from consequences. This episode, whether factual or embellished over time, became part of the narrative surrounding Belle's later ruthlessness. For some, it explained her disdain for societal norms and her eventual transformation into a woman who would stop at nothing to achieve security and power. By her early 20s, Belle had grown restless. The world of Selbu, with its narrow opportunities and rigid social structures, could no longer contain her ambitions. When the chance to immigrate to America arose, she seized it with determination. The decision to leave her homeland was not uncommon. Waves of Norwegians were fleeing the economic hardships of rural Norway during the late 19th century. But for Belle, this was not just an escape, it was a reinvention. Arriving in Chicago in 1881, she adopted the name Belle Gunness, shedding her Norwegian identity as she stepped into a new life in the bustling industrial metropolis. Chicago in the 1880s was a city of contrasts. Its rapid industrial growth brought immense wealth to some, while others lived in squalor. Immigrants like Belle found themselves at the bottom of this hierarchy, often working in grueling conditions for meager pay. Belle initially took up work as a domestic servant, performing physically exhausting tasks for wealthy families. Though the work was hard and the pay minimal, Belle's time in this role offered her a close-up view of the disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Observing the lives of the wealthy, she began to understand the power of money and the lengths to which people would go to secure it. Despite her struggles, Belle possessed an unwavering determination to rise above her circumstances. She saved what little she could from her earnings, always keeping her eye on the possibility of a better future. During this period, she met and married Mads Sorensen, a fellow Norwegian immigrant. Their union marked a significant shift in Belle's life. Together, they opened a candy store in Chicago, a venture that seemed promising at first but soon faced financial difficulties. The store's failure, however, did not spell disaster for the couple. Instead, a mysterious fire destroyed the business, allowing them to collect a substantial insurance payout. This incident marked the beginning of a pattern that would define Belle's life. Where others saw tragedy, she saw opportunity. The fire and subsequent insurance claim were not mere coincidences, they were calculated steps in her pursuit of financial security. For Belle, the moral implications of such actions seemed secondary to their results. This pragmatic, even ruthless approach to problem-solving became a hallmark of her character. The immigrant experience in Chicago was harsh, and Belle's ability to navigate its challenges demonstrated her resourcefulness. Many of her contemporaries struggled to make ends meet, falling victim to the city's exploitative labor system and overcrowded living conditions. Belle, however, thrived in this environment. She quickly learned how to manipulate systems and people to her advantage, a skill that would serve her well in the years to come. Though Belle's marriage to Mads appeared conventional on the surface, it was far from ordinary. Mads, who worked as a department store clerk, was a quiet and unassuming man, seemingly content to let Belle take the lead in their ventures. Together, they built a modest life, but Belle's ambitions extended far beyond what Mads could provide. Their marriage became a stepping stone for Belle, offering her the stability she needed to plan her next moves. The financial struggles of their candy store and its subsequent destruction were not the only trials Belle and Mads faced. The couple's personal life was marked by loss, with the death of their 2 children under suspicious circumstances. While both deaths were attributed to illnesses common at the time, their timing and the insurance policies Belle had taken out on them raised questions. These tragedies, coupled with the fire, hinted at the lengths Belle was willing to go to secure financial gain. By the time Mads himself died suddenly in 1900, Belle had firmly established herself as a woman of both ambition and mystery. Mads's death, attributed to heart failure, occurred on the day his 2 life insurance policies overlapped, resulting in a significant payout for Belle. Once again, tragedy turned into financial opportunity. Though Mads's death was not investigated thoroughly, whispers of foul play began to circulate, foreshadowing the darker chapters yet to come in Belle's life. Belle Gunness' early life and background offer a glimpse into the complexities of her character. From her humble beginnings in Norway to her calculated rise in America, she was shaped by hardship, ambition, and an unyielding desire for a better life. Yet, beneath her determination lay a capacity for manipulation and a willingness to exploit others for her own gain. These traits, combined with the lessons she learned in her formative years, set the stage for her transformation into one of history's most infamous figures. The story of Belle Gunness is one of survival, reinvention, and ultimately, a chilling descent into darkness. Belle's rise to prominence as a figure of both fascination and terror began with her move to La Porte, Indiana. After the mysterious death of her first husband, Mad Sorensen, Belle used the insurance payout to purchase a large farmhouse. The move marked a turning point in her life, offering a fresh start and an opportunity to cultivate a new identity. In Laporte, she projected the image of a hard-working, self-sufficient widow, gaining the trust and admiration of her neighbors. The farm, sprawling and picturesque, became the perfect backdrop for the persona Belle carefully crafted. Her charm and resilience won over the community, shielding her from suspicions that might otherwise have surfaced. Not long after settling in Laporte, Belle married Peter Gunness, a butcher who had recently lost his wife. The marriage was brief and marred by tragedy. Shortly after they wed, Peter died under suspicious circumstances. According to Belle, a meat grinder had fallen from a shelf, striking Peter and killing him instantly. The explanation was implausible, but Belle's emotional performance convinced many of her neighbors of her innocence. She played the role of a grieving widow with remarkable skill, and the authorities, lacking evidence to prove foul play, allowed the matter to rest. Once again, Belle collected a significant insurance payout, further bolstering her financial position. As Belle's wealth grew, so did her reputation as a prosperous landowner. She was seen as a rare example of a woman who had not only survived but thrived in the face of adversity. Her independence and business acumen were admired, and her farm became a symbol of stability. However, beneath the surface, Belle was anything but stable. Her growing confidence in her ability to manipulate those around her emboldened her to take increasingly bold risks. This period marked the beginning of a pattern that would define her life and legacy. Belle's matrimonial advertisements became a key element of her operations. Placed in Norwegian-language newspapers, these ads painted her as a lonely widow seeking companionship and partnership. She described her farm in glowing terms, emphasizing its prosperity and the opportunity it represented for any man willing to share his life with her. The responses to these ads were numerous, as men from across the country, many of them recent immigrants, saw in Belle a chance for stability and love. However, for most of these men, the journey to Laporte would prove fatal. The suitors who arrived at Belle's farm often brought with them their life savings, a fact that Belle skillfully exploited. Promises of a bright future quickly turned to betrayal, as Belle disposed of her victims after securing their money. The farm became a place of dark secrets, where men vanished without a trace. Belle's methods were as ruthless as they were effective. She lured her victims with kindness and charm, only to end their lives and bury their bodies on her property. Her ability to carry out these acts without arousing significant suspicion spoke to her cunning and her capacity for deception. Life on the farm appeared bustling and productive to the casual observer. Belle hired laborers to help with the work, and visitors frequently came and went. To her neighbors, she seemed to be a woman of means, managing her affairs with competence and grace. Yet, those who worked closely with Belle often noticed unsettling details. Some reported strange occurrences, such as the sudden disappearance of suitors or Belle's uncharacteristic outbursts of anger. Still, few dared to confront her directly, as Belle's formidable presence and sharp wit made her a figure to be reckoned with. The community of Laporte began to whisper about the strange happenings at Belle's farm, but her outward respectability largely shielded her from scrutiny. Belle was known for her acts of generosity, often helping those in need and contributing to local events. These gestures served to reinforce her image as a kind and charitable woman. When questions arose about the men who had visited her farm and never returned, Belle offered plausible explanations. She claimed they had moved on to pursue other opportunities or had returned to their families. Her calm demeanor and persuasive nature convinced many that there was no cause for concern. Belle's children also played a role in maintaining her facade. She adopted several children, presenting herself as a caring and devoted mother. Her interactions with them added to the image of a woman dedicated to family and community. However, there were darker implications to her relationship with her children. Some speculated that they might have known more about the events on the farm than they let on, while others believed Belle used them purely as a means of gaining sympathy. Regardless of their level of involvement, the children were an integral part of Belle's carefully constructed persona. As time went on, the pattern of suspicious deaths and disappearances became harder to ignore. Several of Belle's hired hands met untimely ends, often under mysterious circumstances. One young worker confided in a friend that he feared for his life, only to vanish shortly afterward. These incidents added to the growing unease among those who knew Belle, but tangible evidence of wrongdoing remained elusive. Belle's ability to manipulate those around her ensured that she stayed one step ahead of the authorities. The arrival of Ray Lamphere, a drifter-turned-handyman, marked a new chapter in Belle's life. Ray became deeply infatuated with Belle, but their relationship was volatile. Ray's unpredictable behavior and frequent arguments with Belle drew attention, creating cracks in the facade she had worked so hard to maintain. Despite the tension between them, Belle used Ray to carry out tasks that further her schemes. His presence on the farm added to the air of unease that surrounded Belle and her activities. The disappearance of Andrew Helgelian, a wealthy Norwegian suitor, proved to be a turning point. Unlike previous victims, Andrew's family was determined to find out what had happened to him. They pressured local authorities to investigate, bringing unwanted attention to Belle's farm. As the investigation progressed, Belle's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She made efforts to cover her tracks, but the scrutiny was relentless. The events surrounding Andrew's disappearance set the stage for Belle's eventual downfall, as her carefully constructed world began to crumble under the weight of her actions. The series of events that unfolded around Belle Gunness' life in La Porte, Indiana, paints a chilling portrait of deceit, manipulation, and violence. After establishing herself on a sprawling farm with her children, Belle began crafting a strategy that would intertwine wealth and murder. Her method was meticulous and sinister, targeting men through matrimonial advertisements that promised companionship and a stable future. These ads, often published in Scandinavian American newspapers, drew responses from lonely, hard-working men seeking to settle down. Belle's letters were charming and persuasive, portraying her as a kind, practical woman with a prosperous farm. She invited suitors to visit her in La Porte, instructing them to bring their savings along for investment in their new shared life. Tragically, for most of these men, the farm became their final destination. One by one, these men arrived, laden with cash and dreams of starting anew. Neighbors noticed strangers entering Belle's property but rarely saw them leave. The pattern was so consistent that rumors began to spread in the tight-knit community. The farmhands who worked for Belle would later recount peculiar happenings, such as Belle asking for help to dig large holes in the ground. She claimed these pits were meant for garbage disposal, but their dimensions suggested a far darker purpose. The farm's seemingly innocent exterior masked the horrors that lay beneath its soil. Belle's ability to deflect suspicion was remarkable. Her neighbors found her affable and hardworking, a widowed mother striving to secure a future for her children. If questions arose about her constant visitors or the disappearance of men who had been seen at her farm, Belle had ready explanations. She would claim that her suitors decided not to stay or that they had left abruptly for personal reasons. Her charm and maternal image played a key role in silencing doubts. However, beneath this facade was a calculated mind adept at manipulation. As her scheme continued, Belle's relationship with Ray Lamphere, her handyman and sometime lover, added another layer of complexity. Ray had fallen deeply for Belle, and she used his devotion to her advantage. She tasked him with maintaining the farm and helping with physical labor, including digging holes and disposing of belongings left behind by her victims. Over time, their relationship became strained as Belle's affections shifted to her potential suitors, and Ray grew increasingly jealous. His erratic behavior and heated confrontations with Belle drew attention from the community. He began to threaten her, hinting that he might expose her secrets. In response, Belle sought to portray Ray as unstable, setting the stage for him to become her scapegoat if her crimes were ever discovered. The arrival of Andrew Helgelian marked a pivotal turning point in Belle's story. A wealthy Norwegian man, Andrew had been corresponding with Belle and was lured by her promises of love and partnership. Encouraged to bring his savings to invest in their future together, he journeyed to La Porte. However, unlike her previous victims, Andrew's disappearance did not go unnoticed. His brother, Aksel Helgelian, became suspicious when Andrew failed to return home or write letters as expected. Aksel's relentless inquiries led him to contact authorities in La Porte, pressuring them to investigate Belle's farm. For the first time, cracks began to form in the carefully constructed facade Belle had maintained. Before the investigation could fully unfold, Belle's farmhouse was engulfed in flames one night, leaving the local community in shock. As the fire smoldered, investigators sifted through the ruins and discovered several charred bodies inside, including that of a headless woman believed to be Belle herself. The gruesome discovery raised more questions than answers. Outside the farmhouse, A grim revelation awaited. Workers digging on the property unearthed the remains of multiple men buried in shallow graves. Among the bodies was Andrew Helgelian, confirming Assel's worst fears. The discovery of the bodies turned Belle Gunness farm into a macabre spectacle. Crowds gathered, morbidly fascinated by the unearthing of more victims, and the media latched onto the story with fervor. Belle was labeled a female serial killer, a figure of horror and intrigue. Yet the biggest mystery remained unsolved. Was the headless body truly Belle's? Some argued that she had staged her death to escape justice, a theory bolstered by alleged sightings of her in various parts of the country. Others believed that her crimes had finally caught up to her and that she had met a violent end. In the aftermath of the fire, Ray Lamphere was arrested and charged with arson and murder. His trial became a sensational event, drawing widespread attention. During his defense, Ray claimed that he was merely a pawn in Belle's schemes, a claim that both fascinated and horrified the public. He described how Belle had orchestrated the killings and detailed the grisly methods she employed to dispose of her victims. Ray maintained that Belle had planned her own escape and that the headless body was not hers. Despite his testimony, Ray was convicted and sentenced to prison, where he later died. His revelations, however, left a lasting impression, fueling the legend of Belle Gunness. As investigators pieced together the full scope of Belle's crimes, the scale of her atrocities became evident. She had killed for financial gain, exploiting the vulnerability of her victims and the trust they placed in her. Each body unearthed on her farm told a story of betrayal and violence, leaving a legacy of grief for the families of her victims. The people of La Porte, once charmed by Belle's friendly demeanor, were left grappling with the horrifying reality of her actions. The enduring mystery of Belle Gunness' fate continues to captivate historians and true crime enthusiasts. Whether she perished in the fire or lived out her days under a new identity, her story remains a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath a seemingly ordinary exterior. The case of Belle Gunness is not just one of murder but of the manipulation and exploitation of trust, leaving an indelible mark on the history of crime in America. Her name became synonymous with deceit and brutality, and her farm in La Porte stands as a haunting testament to the lives lost to her greed and malice. The climax of Belle Gunness' story unfolds in a whirlwind of tension, violence, and chaos, a culmination of years of deceit and calculated brutality. The series of events leading to the fiery destruction of her farmhouse encapsulates the unraveling of Belle's carefully constructed life of manipulation and murder. At the center of this chaos was her escalating conflict with Ray Lamphere, her former lover and accomplice. Ray, once devoted to Belle, became a liability as his jealousy and anger threatened to expose her crimes. Their tumultuous relationship reached a breaking point when Belle began accusing Ray of mental instability and hinted to neighbors that he might be a danger to her. At the same time, Ray openly voiced his grievances, publicly implicating Belle in activities that cast suspicion upon her. This volatile relationship became the spark that ignited the series of events leading to her downfall. Amidst this tension, the arrival of Assel Helgelian in La Porte set the stage for an even greater confrontation. Unlike many families who mourned the unexplained disappearances of Belle's victims in silence, Assel's determination to uncover the fate of his brother, Andrew Helgelian, brought unwelcome scrutiny to Belle's farm. Assel's relentless inquiries to the local sheriff forced authorities to take a closer look at the farm. Belle, sensing the walls closing in, began exhibiting signs of desperation. She visited her lawyer, claiming that her life was in danger due to Ray's threats, and made a chilling request: she wanted to draft a will. This act, though seemingly routine, was laden with implications. It was as if Belle was preparing for an endgame, whether by death, imprisonment, or escape. What happened next remains one of the most debated and haunting aspects of Belle's story. In the early hours of April 28, 1908, Belle's farmhouse was consumed by a massive fire that reduced it to smoldering ruins. Neighbors and authorities rushed to the scene, but it was too late to save the inhabitants. Amidst the ashes, the bodies of Belle's 3 children were discovered, their lives tragically cut short. The most disturbing discovery, however, was that of a headless adult woman presumed to be Belle Gunness herself. The grisly scene added an air of mystery to the tragedy, as the absence of the head raised questions about the true identity of the body. The immediate aftermath of the fire was chaotic, with law enforcement, neighbors, and onlookers converging on the property. As investigators searched the ruins, a series of shocking discoveries were made. Around the farm, buried in shallow graves or hidden beneath debris, were the remains of numerous victims. The bodies, many of them dismembered, told a gruesome story of betrayal and murder. Personal belongings, letters, and other evidence suggested that these were the suitors who had answered Belle's matrimonial ads, lured to the farm under false pretenses. Among the recovered items were objects linked to Andrew Helgilian, confirming Assel's worst fears about his brother's fate. As the scope of Belle's crimes became clear, public outrage and fascination grew. The media sensationalized the case, portraying Belle as a cunning and ruthless murderer. Reporters descended on LaPorte, documenting every gruesome discovery and speculating about the fate of the woman who had come to be known as the LaPorte murderess. The question of whether the headless body belonged to Belle became a central point of contention. Some believed that she had perished in the fire, while others were convinced that she had staged her death to evade capture. The absence of the head and the lack of conclusive identification fueled theories that Belle had escaped, leaving behind a decoy to cover her tracks. The investigation into the fire and the subsequent trial of Ray Lamphere added another layer of complexity to the case. Ray was arrested and charged with arson and murder, but his trial revealed chilling details about Belle's methods and motives. Ray testified that Belle had orchestrated the murders, describing how she lured men to the farm, killed them, and disposed of their bodies. He also claimed that Belle had meticulously planned her escape, going so far as to recruit a woman whose body could serve as her stand-in during the fire. Ray's account painted a picture of a cold, calculating woman who manipulated everyone around her to achieve her ends. Despite Ray's testimony, the evidence against him was strong enough to secure his conviction for arson. He was sentenced to prison, where he continued to proclaim his innocence in the deaths, insisting that Belle was the true mastermind. His death in prison years later marked the end of his involvement in the case, but his statements continued to fuel speculation about Belle's fate. Some claimed to have seen Belle in different parts of the country, living under assumed identities, while others dismissed these sightings as mere rumors. The climax of Belle Gunness' story is not just the fiery end of her farmhouse but the chilling realization of the full extent of her crimes. The discovery of her victims and the detailed accounts of her schemes revealed a woman whose greed and cunning knew no bounds. The juxtaposition of her outward image as a caring mother and hard-working widow with the reality of her murderous actions shocked the nation and left an indelible mark on American criminal history. The unresolved questions surrounding her fate added an enduring mystique to her story, ensuring that Belle Gunness would remain a figure of fascination and horror for generations to come. The events at Belle's farm in LaPorte were a tragic conclusion to the lives of her many victims, whose trust and aspirations were cruelly exploited. Their families were left to grapple with the devastating losses and the knowledge that their loved ones had fallen prey to a predator. The community of LaPorte, once charmed by Belle's outward persona, was left reeling from the revelation of her true nature. Her crimes shattered the illusion of safety and trust, serving as a grim reminder of the potential for evil to hide behind the most unsuspecting facades. The resolution and decline of Belle Gunness' story encapsulate the aftermath of her crimes and the lingering mysteries surrounding her life and death. After the fire that destroyed her LaPorte farmhouse and the subsequent discoveries of her many victims, the case of Belle Gunness quickly became one of the most sensationalized murder investigations in American history. Law enforcement, media, and the general public were left to piece together the events leading up to that tragic night, but the unresolved questions continued to haunt those involved in the investigation. In the immediate aftermath of the fire, authorities were left grappling with the complexity of the case. Although they had found the remains of Belle's 3 children and a body presumed to be hers, they still faced the problem of determining the true identity of the headless woman found in the ruins. Investigators worked tirelessly to confirm whether the body was indeed Belle, or if she had staged her death and escaped into hiding. Several theories emerged, ranging from the possibility that Belle had been killed in the fire, to the belief that she had staged her own death to avoid capture. The absence of a head and the lack of concrete evidence fueled widespread speculation, leaving the case open to debate and doubt. As time went on, law enforcement's focus shifted toward finding Belle's true fate. Some investigators believed that she had escaped the fire and was still alive, living under an assumed identity in another part of the country. There were numerous reports of people claiming to have seen her in different states, but none of these sightings could be confirmed. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, these rumors only added to the mystique surrounding Belle's life. Her ability to manipulate people, as evidenced by her victims, led many to believe that she had outsmarted authorities and vanished without a trace. The legal proceedings involving Ray Lamphere, Belle's former lover and accomplice, added another layer of complexity to the case. Ray had been arrested and charged with arson and murder, but he continued to maintain his innocence throughout the trial. His testimony about Belle's role in the murders painted a chilling picture of a woman who had meticulously planned the deaths of her suitors and orchestrated the fire to cover her tracks. However, despite Ray's account and the evidence that tied him to the fire, the true extent of Belle's involvement remained unclear. Many people, including Ray's defense, insisted that Belle had orchestrated the entire series of murders, but they could not definitively prove her guilt. The uncertainty surrounding Belle's death and Ray's role in the crime added to the public fascination with the case. Following the conviction of Ray Lamphere, life in LaPorte began to settle into a quiet, uneasy routine. The townspeople, shocked by the revelations of Belle's crimes, slowly began to move on with their lives, but the memory of Belle's murders lingered in the collective consciousness. The town's reputation had been irrevocably damaged by the discovery of so many bodies on Belle's property, and the once idyllic community was now marked by the dark legacy of the LaPorte murderess. Families who had lost loved ones in the killings struggled to find closure, knowing that Belle had likely taken their family members' lives with little remorse. Years passed, and the investigation into Belle's life and her ultimate fate gradually faded into obscurity. While some people still clung to the belief that she had escaped and was living in hiding, others accepted the more likely conclusion, that she had perished in the fire. In the absence of new evidence or leads, the case became a forgotten chapter in American crime history. Belle's name, once synonymous with murder and deception, began to fade from public memory as time took its toll on the details of her story. However, the fascination with Belle Gunness and her crimes remained strong in certain circles. Over the years, writers, filmmakers, and true crime enthusiasts revisited her story, producing books, documentaries, and films based on her life. These modern retellings of her tale reignited public interest in Belle, casting her as a notorious figure in the annals of American criminal history. Despite the lack of concrete answers regarding her death, Belle's reputation as one of the most cunning and dangerous female serial killers in history endured. The unresolved nature of her case, combined with the horrific scope of her crimes, ensured that Belle Gunness remained a subject of intrigue for decades. Whether or not she truly died in the fire or managed to escape continues to be a matter of speculation, but her legacy as a ruthless murderer who preyed on vulnerable men and women remains undeniable. The mystery surrounding her death only adds to the legend of Belle Gunness, solidifying her place in the dark corners of criminal lore. As for Ray Lamphere, his life continued after his conviction, though his name, too, became inextricably linked to Belle Gunness. Despite his time in prison, many still debated his true role in the murders. Some believed that he had been a pawn in Belle's schemes, manipulated into helping her with the murders, while others saw him as a willing accomplice who, for his own reasons, chose to participate in the killings. The full extent of Ray's involvement remains unclear, but his connection to Belle Gunness would forever be a part of the story. In the years that followed, Belle's property in LaPorte became a somber memorial to her victims. While the farmhouse had been destroyed in the fire, the land remained. Visitors to the area were often drawn to the site, curious about the crimes that had taken place there. As the decades passed, the farmhouse's ruin became a symbol of the grisly history that had unfolded in LaPorte. Some locals, still haunted by the memories of the past, avoided the area entirely, while others seemed drawn to it as a place of macabre fascination. In the end, the resolution of Belle Gunness' life and crimes is shrouded in mystery, a chilling testament to her manipulative nature and the lasting impact of her actions. The story of her rise to infamy and her eventual fall from grace serves as a reminder of the darkness that can hide behind the most charming facades. The questions about her death and the true extent of her crimes may never be fully answered, but the legacy of Belle Gunness, the LaPorte murderess, remains etched in history. The legacy of Belle Gunness is one of intrigue and horror, marking her as one of the most infamous female serial killers in American history. Her story is still remembered today, not just because of the gruesome murder she committed, but also because of the enduring mystery surrounding her life, death, and the details of her crimes. Even after more than a century since her suspected death, Belle's name continues to resurface in true crime stories, documentaries, and books, making her a lasting figure in the annals of criminal history. Her legacy is defined by her audacity, cunning, and the sheer scale of her deceit, which captured the public's imagination and continues to raise questions about the nature of evil. One of the most significant aspects of Belle Gunness' legacy is the impact she has had on the portrayal of female criminals in popular culture and criminology. Belle was not only a killer, she was a master manipulator who used her charm and cunning to lure vulnerable men to their deaths. Her crimes shattered conventional ideas about women in crime. At the time, women were generally not seen as capable of committing such violent acts. Belle's ability to present herself as a loving mother and dutiful wife while simultaneously carrying out a series of horrific murders challenged the prevailing stereotypes of women's roles in society. This contrast between her public persona and private life intrigued both the public and scholars, making her an anomaly in the world of criminal investigations. The widespread fascination with Belle Gunness is partly due to the fact that she defied the conventional expectations of female criminality. Her crimes were not those of a passive, desperate woman driven to violence by extreme circumstances, but rather of a calculated and methodical individual who took great care to cover her tracks. She was not a victim of her circumstances but an active agent of destruction, which has often led to her portrayal as a black widow or femme fatale in various cultural representations. This label has contributed to her enduring legacy, as it places her among the ranks of infamous women in history who have used their gender to both hide their true nature and manipulate others. The mystery surrounding her potential survival after the fire in 1908 also played a significant role in keeping her story alive. Despite law enforcement's official conclusion that she perished in the blaze, there was no definitive proof of her death. Over the years, there were many rumors and claims that Belle had escaped and started a new life under a different identity. Some people believed she had fled to South America or even returned to Norway, but no evidence ever confirmed these theories. The fact that her death was never fully resolved only deepened the mystique surrounding her, ensuring that her legacy would not fade into obscurity. Belle's crimes also had a profound impact on the community of LaPorte, Indiana, where her farm had been located. The discovery of so many bodies on her property forever changed the town's reputation. What had once been a quiet rural community was now linked to one of the most chilling serial killers in American history. The case became a local legend, and LaPorte remained synonymous with Belle's crimes for decades. Even today, the area still draws interest from those fascinated by the story. Visitors are often intrigued by the remnants of Belle's home and the horrific legacy left behind by her actions. The town's name became synonymous with dark history, and some locals still prefer to avoid talking about the murders, while others are eager to recount the tale for those seeking to know more about the notorious figure. Beyond LaPorte, the Gunness case had a wider influence on how law enforcement approaches similar criminal investigations. At the time of Belle's crimes, serial murder was not well understood, and female serial killers were a rare subject of study. Belle's case forced authorities and criminologists to consider the possibility that women could be just as deadly and calculating as men, though their methods and motivations might differ. In the years following her crimes, many scholars and law enforcement agencies began to study her case as a means of understanding female criminal behavior. She became a reference point in the early criminological literature on serial murder, offering insight into the psychology of female killers and the unique dynamics of their crimes. Belle Gunness' legacy also had a profound impact on media portrayals of serial killers. Her case was one of the earliest to capture widespread public attention, and it set the stage for future media coverage of similar criminals. Her story, with its elements of deception, greed, and horror, was a perfect fit for sensationalized news stories. The press, both locally and nationally, cover her trial and investigation with an almost obsessive fervor, and many sensationalized aspects of her story to attract attention. This type of media coverage became a hallmark of high-profile criminal cases, particularly when it involved a female perpetrator. The public's fascination with Belle Gunness and her capacity for manipulation and violence helped lay the foundation for the media's role in shaping public perception of serial killers and other high-profile criminals in the years to come. In addition to media coverage, Belle's story has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and films, each offering a different perspective on her life and crimes. These works have often focused on her ability to fool so many people for so long, and her resourcefulness in escaping detection. The books that have chronicled her life have often been sensational in nature, but they have also served to preserve her place in true crime history. They explore the ways in which Belle manipulated vulnerable men, staged her own death, and potentially even escaped justice. These retellings keep her story alive in the public consciousness and continue to fuel interest in her crimes. As new generations of true crime enthusiasts emerge, Belle Gunness remains a captivating figure, her legacy immortalized in popular media. In criminological and psychological circles, Belle's case is often used to highlight the complexities of female criminality. While male serial killers are often motivated by power, control, or sexual desire, female killers like Belle often operate under different psychological drivers. The fact that she killed for financial gain rather than purely for emotional satisfaction is a point of study for those seeking to understand how women can become serial killers. Belle's cold calculation and methodical nature challenge the notion that women, who are often stereotyped as more nurturing, are incapable of such violent acts. The case serves as a reminder that women, too, can be capable of the same dark motivations as men, though the way in which they carry out their crimes might differ. As a lasting figure in criminal history, Belle Gunness' legacy is complex. On the one hand, she embodies the archetype of the ruthless, calculating killer who was able to evade justice for a long time and caused immense suffering to her victims. On the other hand, she represents a mystery that will likely never be fully solved. Did she really die in the fire, or did she manage to escape and start a new life? Will we ever know the true extent of her crimes? These questions continue to captivate the public imagination, ensuring that Belle Gunness remains a fascinating figure in the annals of criminal history. Her legacy as a cunning and dangerous woman who took the lives of so many men for financial gain will live on in the stories that continue to be told about her life and crimes. The story of Belle Gunness is one that continues to captivate and disturb, even more than a century after her alleged death. As one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, her actions and the lasting mystery surrounding her life and crimes have solidified her place in true crime lore. Belle was not just a murderer, she was a master manipulator, a woman who used her charm, cunning, and intellect to deceive those around her, often with devastating consequences. Her story, filled with intrigue, tragedy, and mystery, has left an indelible mark on both criminal history and popular culture. Belle Gunness' legacy is defined by the scale of her deception and the sheer audacity of her actions. She preyed on vulnerable men seeking companionship, luring them to their deaths under the guise of love and marriage. She methodically built a reputation as a respectable widow and mother, using these traits to cover her true nature. Over time, she became a symbol of a rare type of female criminal, one who was capable of heinous acts, not driven by passion or jealousy, but by a cold and calculated desire for financial gain. Her ability to live a double life, hiding her true nature from the public for years, is part of what makes her story so unsettling. Despite the efforts of law enforcement to investigate and bring her to justice, the mystery of Belle Gunness' death has never been fully resolved. Was she truly killed in the fire that destroyed her farm in 1908, or did she manage to escape and assume a new identity? The unanswered questions about her final fate only add to the eerie allure of her story. The uncertainty surrounding her death ensures that she remains a figure of fascination and speculation, even in the present day. This unresolved element has kept the public's interest alive, fueling countless theories and furthering the intrigue surrounding her case. The impact of Belle Gunness on popular culture and criminology is undeniable. Her case challenged societal notions about female criminals and forced both the media and law enforcement to reconsider how they viewed women in crime. She defied the typical image of the female murderer as an emotional, reactionary figure and instead presented herself as a calculating, methodical predator. This shift in perception was significant, as it expanded the understanding of what motivated female killers. Her story has since been recounted in numerous books, documentaries, and films, ensuring that her legacy endures. Moreover, the story of Belle Gunness remains a cautionary tale, a reminder of how deceit and manipulation can take on terrifying forms. Her ability to deceive so many men and elude authorities for so long illustrates the power of charisma and how it can be wielded for evil purposes. Belle's actions left a trail of devastation, not only for her victims but also for their families and the community of La Porte, Indiana. Her crimes have haunted the town for generations, and the legacy of her deeds continues to cast a shadow over the region. The mystery surrounding her life and death also speaks to the complexities of criminal investigation. At the time, serial murder was not well understood, and the idea of a female serial killer was almost unheard of. Belle's case forced authorities to confront the possibility that women could be just as capable of committing multiple murders as men. The case also raised questions about the limitations of early 20th century investigative techniques and the difficulty of solving crimes involving highly manipulative individuals. Belle's story serves as a reminder of the importance of thorough investigation and the need to challenge preconceived notions in criminal cases. As we look back on the legacy of Belle Gunness, we are reminded of the dark capacity for manipulation and violence that exists in even the most unexpected individuals. Her story continues to captivate, leaving us with a chilling sense of unease about the extent to which people can deceive others for personal gain. Whether or not we will ever know the full truth about her crimes, one thing is certain. Belle Gunness will remain a figure whose name is forever associated with one of the most disturbing chapters in American criminal history. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.